Welcome to the overview of CSTE's new policy and position statement process. My name is Meredith Lichtenstein-Cohn, and I'm the manager of CSTE's Surveillance and Informatics program, and I'm also the staff lead for this new process. I'd like to begin today with the conceptualization of our new policy and position statement process, which really began in July of 2017 when the CSTE Executive Board formed a specific work group to review the previous CSTE position statement process from beginning to end and make improvements and recommendations wherever they felt necessary. The work group consisted of 8 of our 10 current Executive Board members, national office leadership, and ad hoc invited subject matter experts, all of us led by Dr. Al DiMaria, the state epidemiologist of Massachusetts and past CSTE president. Our priority topics included really getting back to the basics. What should be considered a position statement and what shouldn't? What should be standardized in our position statement templates moving forward? We also talked about how we could improve the process to make conditions nationally notifiable, as well as address the complexity of our past position statement templates. And last but not least, we really wanted to identify how we could give our membership a voice outside of that position statement process, a more nimble voice without the strict timeline constraints of position statements. So that work group met bi-weekly through the rest of 2017, and through our work group discussions, we developed 2 new ways for CSTE's membership to have a voice and share your opinions on issues of public health, epi, practice, and policy. And those 2 new mechanisms are CSTE briefs and CSTE letters. So that we have thus rebranded our position statement process to encompass all 3 mechanisms, now also known as the CSTE policy and position statement process. First, we'll cover position statements. And the purpose of position statements remains pretty similar, that they represent the documentation and analysis of policy and standardized surveillance issues that affect public health, that are of interest to CSTE's members, and that could result in changes to state or local law, rule, or regulation. Position statements are developed within a CSTE subcommittee, a steering committee, or a smaller group of dedicated subject matter experts. All position statement authors must be CSTE members. Specifically for the submitting and presenting authors, they must be active CSTE members, and that means those of you working at the state, local, tribal, or territorial level. Co-authors may be associate members, and those members are partners working at CDC or other agencies or partner organizations. Position statements must adhere to the correct and current templates as well as the appropriate submission timelines, which are dictated in CSTE's policies and procedures. There are 2 types of position statements, our general policy statements as well as our standardized surveillance for diseases or conditions. Moving forward, CSTE's policy position statements are intended only for issues that would specifically require a vote by the council because they could result in changes to state or local law, rule, or regulation. Standardized surveillance position statements have been reworked starting with the 2018 template to include 2 new parts. The first is the Nationally Notifiable Condition, or NNC, recommendation statement. And this is an optional form that must accompany any position statement addressing a new or existing nationally notifiable condition. Recent CSTE history has shown us that discussions and conversations in voting sessions around a standardized case definition can be clouded by a recommendation to make that condition nationally notifiable. So we have moved all previous national notifiability related actions from our past templates to this new form. And the purpose of that is to really allow members in the council to first focus on that standardized case definition proposed in the position statement, vote to approve that definition, and then address the issue of notifiability. We hope that this will allow for easier case definition standardization and approval moving forward. The next is our technical supplement, which is a required element for a submitted position statement to be considered complete. Since we do want to refocus on the actual narrative case definition proposed, we have moved our 2 technical tables from our past templates to this new supplement. As a reminder, these tables represent that translation of the narrative case definition to machine processable logic, and they really are still an integral part to a complete and coherent case definition. In our work group conversations on refocusing what should and shouldn't be a position statement, the Executive Board decided to remove our specific healthcare-associated infection template for use, noting that the standardized surveillance template really should be sufficient for all diseases and conditions to standardize their case definitions. Each position statement template has standard sections that have to be completed. Some sections are the same across templates, including statement of the problem, references, coordination, and authorship. But mainly the desired actions to be taken, I wanted to highlight. This section is included in both templates and is really the backbone of each type of position statement, as it identifies the next steps to address whatever problem the position statement is bringing forth. One additional update I wanted to highlight to both templates is a change to our coordination section. And we understand that there are instances where non-CSTE members, either at CDC or at other agencies, may be heavily involved in the development and vetting of a position statement, but are not considered authors per se. So this section allows position statement authors to list those non-members so that they may be included in any members-only discussion that occurs during the position statement review process. We have 4 submission mechanisms for position statements. The first is our ordinary process, through which the vast majority of all position statements submitted to the national office come through. Submissions are due 13 weeks prior to each annual business meeting. Next, we have our expedited handling. That submission deadline is between 3 and 13 weeks prior to the business meeting and are used for time-sensitive issues. Next, we have presidential review, and again, this is for urgent, time-sensitive issues, and those must be submitted between 3 weeks and 48 hours prior to the business meeting. And last, we have our interim position statements, and these may be submitted throughout the year in between business meetings, but must be for issues that are too time-sensitive to wait until the next ordinary process begins. All submissions for all mechanisms are via email to the national office at positionstatements@cste.org. We have 4 levels of review for ordinary process position statements, the first of which is our national office internal review, which lasts 2 weeks after submission. We then have our second level, which is our appropriate steering committee chair review and approval, which again lasts 2 weeks. This coincides with our technical subject matter expert review, where we send all standardized surveillance position statements to a selected group of position statement experts to review, take a deep dive and technically review the narrative case definitions and the technical supplement. The third level of review is our membership review. That lasts 6 weeks. It begins when the national office posts all submissions that were approved out of the steering committee chair review level. We post those on the CSTE website behind the members-only firewall, so you do have to log in to view those position statements, but you may view them, download them, and then provide feedback directly with the position statement authors before the annual conference. During this time, we also host a webinar series for position statement discussions where we invite position statement authors to join a webinar where they present their position statement, and then we open it up for Q&A with members on the webinar to provide that author with some live feedback. At the conference, we also host a series of position statement discussion roundtables, which are for members only. Usually those are in our infectious disease track of the annual conference because we receive a lot more infectious disease position statements than any other committee. But if a committee does receive multiple position statements, we are open to scheduling a discussion roundtable for those position statements. Also at the annual conference are our position statement committee voting sessions. Again, those are members only, and they take place the last 2 days of the conference. And those are really where the committee takes deep dives into their position statements one last time, reviews each position statement, the desired actions to be taken, the purpose, etc. And then they vote to approve each position statement out of committee to go forth to the council for the council's review and approval. So that is our 4th level of review, and the council review and approval takes place at our annual business meeting. So the council, again, will hear position statements and will vote upon them, and all approved position statements immediately become CSTE policy. For expedited handling position statements, the review criteria are judged by the current CSTE Secretary-Treasurer, and those criteria are really, is the issue time-sensitive? Does it have substantial importance due to its impact on public health? What is the quality of the submission? Is it adequate? As well as the appropriate steering committee chair also must agree to accept that proposed submission into the expedited handling process. For presidential review, the review criteria are judged solely by the current CSTE president, and really the review criteria is, or criterion is the issue extremely urgent and relevant, and it is up to the president's discretion. Lastly, for interim position statements, the entire current executive board at the time of interim position statement submission is involved in its review and approval. If approved by the board, the statement immediately becomes official CSTE policy until the next business meeting, and that is where the statement must be ratified or it will become null. The national office is responsible for the dissemination of all approved position statements. As I mentioned, all approved position statements become official CSTE policy, and then the national office does perform one final technical review after they are approved and then post position statements to our position statement archive on the CSTE website as soon as possible. Coinciding with their posting, we also share the position statements with all agencies that are identified in those statements, either for a response or for information only. And whenever we receive a response from those agencies, we are sure to share those with the authors as well as post them in that position statement archive. One last thing to note on position statements is that the authors themselves are actually responsible for tracking their position statements throughout the year following their adoption. I'll now move on to our process for briefs, which resulted from our redefining what should be a policy position statement. The executive board realized that if we constrained position statements to those that could result in state or local rule or regulation change, we need another more nimble way for membership to express their opinions. So the purpose of our briefs is for membership to provide opinions on any issue, topic, policy, or best practice that would not directly result in changes to state or local law, rule, or regulation. We have two types of briefs, issue briefs and policy briefs. Issue briefs identify, define, and explain issues, and some examples include, but are not limited to, statements of facts about an issue, CSTE's opinion or perspective on an issue, results of an assessment with its implications, state of a content area, or the state of a condition, etc. Policy briefs take positions on issues and may propose policy action by CSTE or by other agencies and organizations, but don't affect state or local law, rule, or regulation. Again, some examples may include, but are not limited to, CSTE's position on a policy issue of concern, guidance for best practices, a statement of support for a specific policy or guideline from an external source, endorsement of positions taken by other organizations, etc. So as we have just recently launched this new process in April of 2018 for briefs, we acknowledge that our list of example briefs is not exhaustive, and we really do hope to add more examples to further clarify what could be a brief as we implement this new process in the upcoming months. Unlike position statements, we don't have standard sections that must be included in a brief. We only have an outline suggestion that should only be used as a guide. In a submission, we ask for a title of the brief, the type of brief, which program area the brief is submitted under, for instance, infectious disease committee, surveillance informatics committee, environmental health, etc., followed by the actual content of the brief. So we hope that a brief would contain the description of the problem, why it's important to CSTE's members, CSTE's position on the policy or issue, any next steps or options for consideration, and lastly, a list of the authors involved in the brief's development. Briefs may be developed in a subcommittee or a steering committee, again, by CSTE members only. Similar to position statements, all authors of briefs must be members of CSTE. Our primary authors must be active members, but co-authors may be associate members. Unlike position statements, there is no submission timeline, and briefs may be submitted throughout the year to the national office via briefs@cste.org. There are 4 levels of review for CSTE briefs. The first level is the appropriate subcommittee chair and CSTE program manager. So for example, if the HAI subcommittee is developing an issue brief on an HAI topic, the HAI subcommittee chair would have to approve after their review of that brief, as well as the CSTE infectious disease program manager here at the national office. The second level of review is the appropriate steering committee chair. So in that example, it would have been our infectious disease steering committee chair, our current CSTE president or his or her designee, and our executive director in consultation with the full executive board. So the full board will be aware of whenever a brief is submitted to us, even if they don't have the distinct requirement of review and approval. The third level of review is our membership comment period on the CSTE website, which will be open 3 weeks per brief. And our fourth and final is if any major changes are made to a brief, a final review is required by the appropriate steering committee chair in consultation with our executive director and our president or his or her designee. The membership comment period, like I mentioned, will be open for 3 weeks per brief. We plan to use CSTE's website forums to hopefully promote a lot of feedback and discussion amongst members. What will be nice is that the authors of briefs will be able to export and receive all of the comments related to their brief so that they can make edits as necessary after the membership comment period closes. And while the CSTE National Office does plan to email all membership for the first few briefs when they become available for comment, it is up to you to sign up for the commenting distribution link in order to be notified in the future whenever a brief is posted for comment. We want to minimize spamming the whole 1,900 plus members whenever a brief is available, so please do sign up using the link on this slide that is showing now. The National Office is responsible for distributing approved briefs, which will be posted on the CSTE website in a new brief archive within 10 days after approval. Lastly, let's move on to CSTE's letters. Now, CSTE has been writing letters to our partners for many years. This is not, letters are not new, but the Executive Board wanted to formalize the development and review processes for future letters, as well as increase our transparency by making our future as well as some recent past letters available on our website. The formalized purpose, then, of CSTE letters is to document a specific action or series of actions requested by CSTE's membership of an external individual, agency, or organization. In developing these new brief and letter processes, the Executive Board did envision that some letters could accompany approved briefs if there are any actions needed on a brief topic. While we don't have required formats or content for letters, we do have the following guidance. The organization and of content of a letter is dependent completely on topic and preference of authors or individual author. Each letter must have at least one addressee, which means the letters can't be addressed to whom it may concern or dear colleagues. Letters approved through this process have 2 signatories, our executive director and our current CSTE president, or an executive officer designee if the president is unavailable at the time for signature. All letters must comply with CSTE's policy for obtaining official CSTE signature for letters of advocacy, and this is a new addition to CSTE's policies and procedures. And once a letter is approved, it will be formatted on CSTE letterhead before distribution and posting on the website. Letters may be developed within a CSTE subcommittee or steering committee, and again, all authors of letters must be CSTE members. We do hope and request a list of authors will be submitted accompanying a letter just for our records. Similar to briefs, there is no submission timeline constraint, and letters can be submitted year-round to the National Office via letters@cste.org. There are 2 levels of review for CSTE letters. The first level is the appropriate subcommittee chair, steering committee chair, and CSTE program manager. And that second level is our CSTE president or his or her designee and the executive director in consultation with the executive officers. So that means that the full board may not need to review and approve a letter moving forward. It can just be up to the president and executive director, or they could bring in the other 3 executive officers in addition to the president if necessary. It's also up to the executive director if he or she wants to share a letter with the full EB, as well as with our Washington liaison. That's completely at his or her discretion. The National Office is responsible, again, for distributing all approved CSTE letters. We will be sending letters to the individuals or agencies listed in the letter, as well as posting letters on the CSTE website in a new letter archive within 10 days after approval. We also will share any responses that we receive to the letters with the primary author of letters, the executive board, as well as with membership, because we will post them in that letter archive upon receipt. For next steps, Now that we've launched this new policy and position statement process, the National Office is focusing its next step efforts really on education. We have started with a website redesign, which can be found at the URL on this slide. We have built a brand new landing page for the overall process, as well as individual sub-landing pages for all three position statements, briefs, and letters. Each of those pages then has a lot of the information presented today, along with some further details, resources, etc. So please do explore that redesigned website. We are also working on developing FAQ pages for each of these three mechanisms, and we'll post those onto this new website as soon as they are available. In April 2018, we already submitted a membership-wide announcement to you all, announcing this new process, but we do plan in the next 12 months or so to send a couple of reminders to all membership, reminding you that this process exists, that you can have a voice through these new mechanisms, because we know that the first email didn't reach everyone. We also are hosting this membership-wide webinar, which will be archived in the resource pages for each of the three mechanisms on the new website. And next, we are really focusing on building some training materials. We were thinking about first starting with position statements, how to write a position statement, how to complete those technical supplement tables, but then focusing on some brief and letter training materials if need be. And like I mentioned before, we will be focusing on some of our communication efforts on the brief posting announcements for the first few briefs that we receive and that we post for member comments. So that friendly reminder, do sign up for that distribution list to be notified of future briefs. We also want to focus some of our education efforts on our leadership. We plan to host a webinar for our steering committee chairs and our subcommittee chairs so that they know what you as their members might be developing. We also have an upcoming executive board transition in June, so we will be sure to continue to educate CSTE's leadership on this new process. We also need some partner education. And previously, we have targeted some education efforts with CDC and our colleagues there on position statements specifically, but we also are going to target our CDC partners for this new process education. Specifically, the difference between position statements, briefs, and letters, how they are developed, how they are each vetted, and why each is as important as the others. But we know this next year will be a trial year as we implement this new process, and so we really do welcome your feedback and any questions that you may have. We have identified some specific feedback that we're going to be seeking. The first is from our 2018 position statement authors who had to use a brand new template with two pretty large changes with the new NNC recommendation statement and the technical supplement. So we will be reaching out to authors this summer to see how their experience went for 2018. Whenever we have authors of briefs and letters, we will be reaching out to them as well for any of their feedback with the process and the development of the documents. But we are really interested, too, in general membership feedback on our communications and the resources that we develop and provide, our education efforts. Next, really on the functionality of our member comment forums whenever a brief is posted. When we can pilot test that, we will really seeking feedback from you all on how that works, or if there's another way to gather feedback that you think would be more efficient. And again, we welcome feedback on the process in general. So if you have any feedback or any questions at all, please don't hesitate to email the National Office. We will be monitoring all three of those email addresses, but please try to target position statements at cste.org for any of your questions and feedback. And with that, I will end today's webinar. Thank you so much for your time, but I will open it up for some live questions.